Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast coming to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, joined by Simon Bajkowski, and a long international break is over and football is back. And so apparently is controversy if you believe that a player not interfering with play is offside. But we'll get onto that. And City got a massive win at Molineux. It looked like they were going to drop points. Obviously, Arsenal lost on Saturday. It looked like they weren't going to take advantage, and then John Stones, who else, pops up, and his average goal time this season is now 96 minutes, only 96 minutes. So he's got a bit of work to do there. Si, it was a bit of a hectic ending, wasn't it? It rewrites the sort of story of the game. We were saying on the way back, it was probably going to be one of those where you're saying that they're playing okay, but they just didn't do enough. But then that goal literally changes everything.
Yeah, and also sort of tried to get Pep on this afterwards, and maybe he had microphone issues, but maybe he just didn't want to answer. But like an injury time winner or an injury time goal always kind of does a lot for morale and momentum. And when you think about City's kind of long unbeaten and winning runs, they tend to have these moments, going back to like Benjamin Mendy running down the pitch on crutches and things like that. City have had two of them already this season. They both come from John Stones, scoring late on against Arsenal and then scoring on late on here. He is certainly the man for the moment. Doesn't score many goals, but when he does, he pops up, and it did just transform the afternoon, because it was probably a disappointing afternoon for City until that moment. But then they score, and it's 3 big points, and they can be instantly, they're sort of injected with momentum right at the start of a new block of fixtures. And they've got plenty to work with going into, the next few games. So you can't really underestimate how important that goal was.
Because if they don't get the goal, it's a 1-1 draw against the bottom of the league, who admittedly played very, very well, but it's another game where they've fallen behind. You start asking questions of the defence. You're thinking, Erling Haaland's only had 12 touches, I think it was. He's not being involved. All these questions are being asked, which we might come on to, but they're not asked at the start of the press conference anymore. It's Pep wasn't that good. What does this mean? What does it mean for the title race? And it changes the narrative as well, I think, which is also important. Let's start at the beginning, because City did fall behind. They went for the sort of, I call it the chaos option of Doku and Savinho on the wings, and they were getting loads of crosses in and some nice moves around the area. But then, not for the first time this season, they've conceded a transitional goal on the break, and they got back into it. But is it a concern that they're still conceding these goals now and sort of falling behind first? They're the only team that are still unbeaten. It's clearly there's something in the squad that they're reacting to it, but they can't get away with it forever, you feel?
Yeah, I think it is a concern. And I think they were in a similar position last year, and they could kind of point to sort of like, shots deflected in, or own goals, or, unfortunate things. Whereas this season, we're kind of seeing the same pattern of City's midfield and lines just being played through, and the defense being unable to get into the right positions. We've seen a lot of instances this season where the defenders just haven't been where they need to be, and not, you don't want to put full blame on them, because in sort of some circumstances it's because they've not expected the midfield and the team to be played through as easily as they have. But yesterday at Wolves, it was interesting because you felt like City was snapping at Wolves, and every sort of touch that a Wolves player took, they were under immense pressure to keep the ball. There was one instance just after Wolves went ahead where Savinho robbed, I think it was Totti, on the edge of the box, but Wolves kept the ball and then played through City, and within seconds they'd scored. So I think City are just too easy for teams to play through, and that has been shown kind of by the better teams, but also the teams at the the wrong end of the table. So it is an issue, and it's the sort of thing that, like, you know, you think back to even Real Madrid coming to the Etihad last season, and they only needed one instance to score the goal that, thanks to a penalty shootout, put them through. But you know, it didn't matter to the result yesterday. But you feel like if City continue to be as lax this season with that approach, then it will cost them in big games and affect their chance of winning trophies.
Because I think Declan Rice was talking about Arsenal and saying that they got away with it twice, having a player sent off and playing half a game with 10 men, but they didn't get away with it at Bournemouth. And you feel like was it the fourth time that they've conceded the first goal? Brentford, Ipswich, Fulham and Wolves, all in sort of the first 15 minutes or so. And in all of those instances, City have been level by half time or ahead. So that you've got, as much as you could criticise them, you've got to say, well, they've got the system of just keeping calm, carrying on, trusting the system and getting back into it. But there will be a time where, for example, against Arsenal, they conceded a second, and it was probably because Arsenal had a player sent off that they were able to get that late equaliser. It feels like you say, when they come up against a better team, it might be a bit more costly. And I think it might be significant that Guardiola a couple of weeks ago was like, no, it's not an issue, we're fine. It's only happened once, twice. And now, before the international break, he was saying, yeah, I'm a bit worried. We'll have to look at it over the break. And what was it, 7 minutes into the first game back, they'd done the same thing. And like you said, it's so easy how these goals are going from one end of the pitch to the other. It must sort of infuriate Guardiola so much that it keeps happening again. And he's hamstrung a little bit with who he can play in defence. Walker hasn't been great, but he wasn't available, and Lewis wasn't in the right position. And Gvardiol is very good in attack, as he's shown, but a couple of those goals have come on that side. I'm not really sure where the answer is, to be honest, but I think half of the games you conceded the first goal, it must be something that Guardiola is tearing his sort of metaphorical hair out about.
Yeah, I saw a video about it the other day, which may or may not be true, but was suggesting that it's kind of City have got less good at intensely pressing opposition teams, and so they're a bit happier or either they're less good, so teams play through them, or they're happier for teams to have the ball because they're less good. And so when teams have the ball, they can do things like that. I think also transitions are up generally in the league, and transitions have always been what City have struggled against, because they like to spend all of their time in, the opposition third. So there's that also. But it does seem like it is a kind of collective problem. You can't just say, oh, Kyle Walker was not in the right place there, or Rico Lewis wasn't, or Mateo Kovacic should have been quicker to respond. It seems like it's a team thing, which is the whole Guardiola thing, right? Everyone attacks, everyone defends, and at the minute everyone is not defending well enough for City to be able to see out games more comfortably than they are doing at the minute, because they've not had a clean sheet in the league since the opening day, which is pretty damning for them, really. At the same time, they won on Sunday, and they've won most of their games, and they're unbeaten. So there's clearly lots that is going right in the team. So it's not cost them yet, but it has still. Every time that happens, it encourages the next team who plays them to try it and maybe score. So it's kind of a sort of a continuing problem for them, and every time it happens, it gets worse for them.
I think that's a point there, because it used to be that you didn't know how to play against City. They were just so good. If you put all your players behind the ball, City will find a way through. If you have a go at City, they'll exploit the space and put 4 or 5 goals past you. Now it seems like there is a way where you can put all your players behind the ball, get an early goal, and if you're lucky, you'll get a result. But again, for all these things we're saying, they've come back every single time, and I think that deserves some credit as well. And I think Gvardiol said after the game that it needed something, and he took a risk with his shot, and it found the top corner. And when you've got a fullback like that who can cut inside on his weaker foot and bend the ball into the top corner for the third time in 2 seasons. It's pretty impressive. And we were saying during the game, like, he doesn't score a tap in, does he, Gvardiol? There seems to be players like him who always come up when's needed. So the attackers weren't necessarily finding the right pass, or the crosses weren't finding Haaland. He was being marked out of the game. It just wasn't working in attack. And then you get Gvardiol, and he's suddenly got City back on terms, and the entire game changes. And suddenly it's all about when City will get the winner, not if. It's really, really useful to have a player like Gvardiol who can do that, because he did it at Newcastle as well.
Yeah, I mean, just like, where do you start with Gvardiol? It is just ridiculous, his catalogue of goals for City. And yeah, this idea, because he came as this centre back. Nobody can say City have sort of plucked him from nowhere, because they signed him as like the second most expensive defender ever. But they didn't sign him for his goals. And even last season, kind of when he was getting up and scoring, a lot of the time he was like, yeah, I don't know why I was in this position. The manager certainly didn't want me to be in this position. But he's learned on the job, and he kind of went away at the start of this season a bit and didn't do that much, or didn't get into those positions as much, but he's firmly back now. And yeah, just phenomenal asset for City to have in their team. And as well, he doesn't get injured, this guy. He's capable of playing 3 games a week, and every game he plays, he's an attacking threat. As much as the goal came down his side, but apart, I'm not sure what more he could have done for the goal. And also, kind of, there are a lot more, not a lot more, but a few significant moments where he was very, very good defensively. So he's kind of, he has got it all. And we've been talking about John Stones becoming like the midfielder that going from the defender to sort of this all-star midfielder, and maybe it's Gvardiol that's gonna take that leap.
But there's talk of Gvardiol sort of coming inside in that Stones inverted defensive midfielder role. He's sort of gone into a number 8 position, really, sort of another attacker, and he doesn't go down the flank and put a cross in like your traditional fullback. He comes inside and pops up in those positions, and it feels like they've got Lewis doing the same on the other side. It might be a reason why they are open to these counter attacks and transitions, but it just adds another body in those areas in between, especially when you got Wolves playing 5 at the back and 2 holding midfielders. It's just another player in those spaces to pop up. And I think you pointed out on the way home that Ruben Dias pops up there as well, and Stones is there, and they've got all of the defenders really have an attacking part of their play as well. And it's not just getting down to the byline and overlapping and putting a cross in. It's more intelligent than that, and really filling a role in the team and finding space that isn't expected of a defender normally. I think it's really intriguing to watch, and especially Gvardiol, as he's sort of, you can see him learning on the job, which is quite interesting. He's going to make mistakes while he's doing that, but when he's scoring goals like that at the same time, it's not a bad thing to turn around and say, yeah, well, look what I did against Madrid and Luton and Wolves and Newcastle.
Yeah, and it's very easy to say, oh, people should be wise to Gvardiol by now. He's got an attacking threat. Why aren't you closing him down or whatever? But it's the same with Erling Haaland. He finds space in the box time after time because he's really intelligent and he's really good at finding spaces that others don't. And Gvardiol is similar. He's just exceptionally good at being able to find space where he will be free, and then his teammates are really good at finding him, and that will get better and better over time. And opponents sort of only play City once or twice a season, so it's not like they will learn every week on the job as well. So he's always going to have that advantage, really, unless teams decide they want to double or triple mark him. That's sort of the real kind of bonus for City with it all.
And the danger when you do that with any City player is you then free up Phil Foden or Bernardo Silva or whoever's on your wing, and Doku and Savino were double marked against Wolves and still got dozens of crosses in each and players booked. And it's it is again a nightmare. And I think Gary O'Neill was saying afterwards, his team played really well and unlucky, but it's really difficult to keep City out for 95, 96, 97 minutes, and nobody has yet done that. An unsung hero maybe at Molineux was Ederson. He didn't have a lot to do, but at 1-0, Semedo goes through the middle. Gvardiol puts him off a little bit, but that is a massive save, because at 2-0, I'm not sure City would have come back. Certainly the way Wolves defended, they probably wouldn't have won the game.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear Guardiola talk the other week about Ederson when he was talking about him staying. And because we all kind of know Ederson for his distribution and his calmness under pressure, and he's kind of seen as like that attacking side of being a goalkeeper. He's kind of changed that side of the game, and you accept that he's not kind of a world-class shot stopper, and that has been kind of the tug in the last season or two, where Stefan Ortega's been better at shot stopping and one-on-one situations, and it's sort of how, what's the perfect balance. But it was interesting because Guardiola spoke about Ederson sort of as a shot stopper, and sort of saying, we won the Champions League because of Ederson's shot stopping. When Ederson hasn't saved the shots, we've gone out of the Champions League. And it was kind of just sort of, I don't know, a change to hear Guardiola view Ederson through this lens when none of us really do. And, you don't kind of remember many of Ederson's saves. They don't seem like that huge, like Ortega's against Son, and obviously that's an extreme example, but there's quite a few games this season where Ederson's made important saves, and that was another one on Sunday. He played very, very well against Fulham and made important saves. He played very well against Brentford, made important saves, played very well against Newcastle and made, I think, one very good save. And I think he was pretty unlucky with the Gordon penalty, because he kind of did everything he possibly could to get out of the way. And, on another day, that's not given. So, yeah, he's just made a very strong start to the season, but, as well as, I think he got an assist against Brentford. But on top of the side of the game that we all know, it's been through shot stopping, where he's looked really good and really solid.
He deserves credit for that as well over the last 2 or 3 years, maybe. I remember a year or two ago, there was a sort of an online campaign of Ederson must go because he doesn't save shots, and the first shot he faces every game, it goes in, and there was such a clamour. And whenever Guardiola was asked about it, he just didn't understand it. But now he's backing that up, and he is making those saves, and no one's going to put any title win or anything down to Ederson saving against Semedo. But it is those moments where that changes the momentum of a game just as much as Gvardiol putting it in the top corner at the other end. And it's those moments, like you say, that are just as important. And yeah, we were saying you can't say this game will win anything for City, but it feels similar to maybe the Newcastle game where they needed to get that win late on and do it. So we might be talking in a few months' time about that Stones goal at Molineux, but maybe we should also be talking about the Ederson save at Molineux and other examples of that. I remember talking to Ortega in the summer and basically saying just how important that save was, and he just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, it's my job. I'd be disappointed if I didn't save it. And I'd imagine Ederson has a very similar view, because that is what they are expected to do. And you maybe get the sense he was frustrated at the narrative that had been portrayed of him, but it's easy to forget, like you say, he's a very good goalkeeper at the same time. And it feels like for all the talk of Ortega staying and will he become number one, Ederson is undoubtedly number one after everything that went on over the summer.
Yeah, and goalkeepers are kind of like the opposite of strikers. Like, we remember them conceding goals far more than keeping goals out, and just as we sort of remember the goals scored by Haaland rather than the ones sort of he doesn't put away. And Ederson, still in his top 3 memorable moments of the season, up there will be that sort of weird back heel he came out and did that kind of went to no one, but was just peak Ederson. But he has been doing very, very well at the basics of shot stopping and stopping one-on-ones. And that's probably, I don't think you can downplay the role of Stefan Ortega in pushing him and motivating him, and Xabi Mancisador, the goalkeeping coach. But also, like you say, just like Ederson deserves praise for lifting his own game, and sign again in this Guardiola team that it doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to be 20 years old to kind of learn and improve on the job. Like, it's a constant process of getting better, which has kept City where they are.
And it's another example where you are allowed to consider leaving, but also if you turn up every day and produce, that's not going to affect being picked in the team. And he thought about leaving in the summer. He decided to stay, and he's kept his spot. On the subject of goalkeepers, any sympathy for Wolves on the Stones goal? It feels like it's being made into an issue that it shouldn't be, just because it's City and it's a last minute winner, and it's at the same time as Arsenal drop points, and we feel like we should be having a go at referees, but Bernardo moved out of the way.
Yeah, I think
I don't get the furore about it.
I think the furore is people don't understand the rules, and people who are paid to be in sort of, to speak about these things don't understand the rules. So it was, like the decision was he offside or not? And it was kind of like, no, he's not offside because he is, you can't be from a corner until Stones heads it. And then, was he interfering with play? Was he fouling the goalkeeper? And the decision was no. I think you could make a case that he was, but it would have been soft. I can understand Wolves being disappointed with it because they had a similar one that went against them last season. Although while it was similar, like, their player was stood in front of the goalkeeper, and I think the goalkeeper came out afterwards and said he could still see the ball, but it was harder for the referees to know that the goalkeeper could see the ball because he was stood directly in front of him, whereas Bernardo Silva is not only to the side of him, he's also kind of on his knees by the time Stones heads it, so he's nowhere near. I think you could maybe say if Stones had headed it in the direction of Silva, it might have been more of an issue, but it wasn't. And did a little, the way that the referees have gone with allowing these things, Arsenal have become the masters of it, haven't they? Like Ben White standing on the keeper and not letting him have a run, and Ederson got blocked off in the Arsenal game, and everyone said Ederson should be stronger. That goal is given because Ederson can't get to where he wants to be, but that's his fault. So I don't think you can turn around and say, oh yeah, no, that goal's disallowed because Jose Sarr is, distracted by Bernardo Silva. It's really clever from Bernardo Silva. It's very well worked. It's a cracking header. And it's a legitimate goal. And, the linesman, you can see why the linesman flagged. But ultimately, VAR has helped the right decision to be given. So everyone loves to moan about VAR and the refs and all that. And, again, we should kind of credit them when they get it right and say that was an example of the whole process working as it should.
I think I'm always of the opinion that if you move out of the way as the ball passes you and don't touch it, you're interfering with play. But Bernardo moves out of the way before Stones heads it. And he's completely out of the way. Sarr has a complete clear vision of the ball. It's not like, I can't remember the exact circumstances, but was it a Kanji at home against Fulham last year where he was offside and it was given? There was a goal where City, it was given for City, and it shouldn't have been.
Yeah, that they said shouldn't have been. Yeah.
That was a sort of an extreme example of a player interfering without touching the ball. I think.
Yes.
This one, I think, like you say, Bernardo has been really clever, and that's been missed as well. Like, everyone's saying, oh, he's offside. Actually, he's used his position, anticipating that what's going to happen, and has done it in a way that it will go in City's favour. And I think I was in the mix zone afterwards, and one of the Wolves players just said, "I've seen it. He's sort of in the way, and these things are just going against us at the moment." And Gary O'Neill was saying he wasn't using that as an excuse. He was more bothered why his Stones got a free header, and then suggested that referees maybe favour big clubs like City over small clubs like Wolves because it's easier. And he didn't use that example. He didn't make it an excuse, which I quite liked. He changed the direction of the conversation a little bit, but it feels like Wolves aren't going to make any major complaints like they have done in the past. Any thoughts on O'Neill's suggestion that City get favourable decisions? I'm sure City would consider themselves the victim of that same logic when they come up against maybe United or Arsenal or Liverpool.
I think the point was that it wasn't a point about City; it was a point about bigger clubs getting decisions over little smaller clubs, and it was a point about how Gary O'Neill and his Wolves team feel something a bit different when Erling Haaland and Pep Guardiola come to town, just as I'm sure they do when they go to Anfield against Mo Salah. And his point was just like, referees are only human too, so sometimes that they might get influenced. I thought it was a very good point. I'm not sure it was the most sensible time to make it after a decision that sort of was perfectly understandable, but he can only make it when he can make it, and he can only say it when he can say it. And I think if we accept that kind of referees can be influenced by a crowd, then I think you have to accept that they could get influenced by a player or a team or an atmosphere, an occasion, or a ground, because like you could see it. There've been instances in the past where referees have been criticised for being sort of too chummy with players, like calling Wayne Rooney Wazza or like Trent or things like that. And you think, like if you do know some players more than others, then maybe it's true. And it like players who have reputations for diving are more likely to be carded than players who don't, and things like that. So if we accept that referees can be influenced by some things like that unwittingly, I don't think it's absurd to think that they could be influenced by the bigger teams. And while I don't want to make it a City thing, because it's not a City thing, like we do watch City games more than any other team. So for an example, that goal that Watford scored against City in the League Cup, where Caden Braithwaite gets brushed off the ball and is given as a foul, would that have been given if it was played at Watford rather than at City? Would it have been given if it was Erling Haaland bouncing a defender off the ball? Because it looks fun when Haaland does that. I don't know, and those are the kind of things.
If it was 10 years older, probably wouldn't have been given.
Yeah. If it had been Ruben Dias that had been bounced off the ball, would it have been given? So I think those are the kind of situations where you sort of wonder whether the bigger teams do get the bounce. And I think personally, this idea that everything balances out in the end, no, it doesn't. And usually it's the club like Wolves who are not on the right side of it.
And I think they were the only club who voted against scrapping VAR for that reason. I did think the comments were shocking, but only in the way that they were well articulated, well thought out, well measured, and very reasonable and balanced on all sides. So that's probably why we've not heard a lot about it, and it's not on all the back pages. And
and also maybe,
do you know what, you've got a point, Gary.
But also maybe because it's Gary O'Neill who said it and not Pep Guardiola. And when Pep Guardiola says it, it means more, just because Pep Guardiola is a bigger figure in the game. But yeah, to balance out the City get loads, City didn't get a penalty at Old Trafford for over 30 years. So was that because they didn't deserve a penalty at Old Trafford in over 30 years? Or was it because there's, something unconscious about giving penalties against United at Old Trafford in the derby or whatever? Like, you don't know. but it's these kind of things do leave managers and fans sort of thinking what's going on, and it's not to say it's all a conspiracy or all refs are rubbish and everything. And I think Chris Kavanagh and his team were excellent at Wolves on Sunday, but like I say, I don't think the teams like Wolves end up with sort of more decisions in their favour than not.
On that, we'll leave it there for a quick break, and then we'll be back to discuss a couple more players and look forward to a week against Sparta Prague and Southampton. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. A little bit more before we leave Wolves. Bit of redemption sigh in a way for Matheus Nunes. I thought his City career was summed up when he was beckoned to come on. He got loads of abuse on the touchline, and then Bernardo Silva actually was okay and didn't need to come off injured, and he was told to sat back down. And I thought that was his City career in a nutshell. But then he does come on, gets a lot of abuse, very, very personal from the Wolves fans, and he produces a very, very good tackle from behind to dispossess a Wolves attack. And after that was sort of the momentum City needed to go and get the winner. And I enjoyed his social media post of cupping his ears to the fans. I bet he enjoyed that last minute goal more than the majority of City players.
Yes, yeah. Was it Matheus Nunes? Your teeth are offside. He got when he came on,
and a few others that we probably shouldn't repeat.
Yes, yeah. That's the only family-friendly chant from the blunt Wolverhampton Wanderers fans. What he gave City was energy and legs and sort of combat in midfield, which they'd not had, and arguably contributes towards them being too easy to play through and conceding goals. It's sort of like if Nunes can do what he did in those 10 minutes he was on the pitch on a more consistent basis, then like the path into the City side is there for him for more games, for more opportunities, and really the kickstart of his City career. It's just consistency. You never really know what you're going to get from him. And that's why he's not been able to kind of nail down a place in the side or, more minutes than he has done, because he's not played as much, anywhere. Compare him to Jeremy Doku, who was signed for similar money, and Doku has been trusted far more than Nunes has. But, brilliant from him when he came on, did exactly what was needed. And, you would think that Pep and the coaches will be saying to him, yeah, give us that, and here's your name in the starting 11. So you would think perhaps Saturday's game at home to Southampton has the potential for Nunes to start. Either side of Sparta Prague at home and Sporting Lisbon away. You'd think Tottenham away in the cup, which again he might play in that, but the more he impresses like he did on Sunday, the more games you start thinking, you know what, maybe that's the game to really get him going. So yeah, very, very positive for him, and yes, he will have very much enjoyed the goal and the win.
I still don't know where his best position is, and he came on for Kovacic, and he's not going to replace Kovacic sort of for a full game. I don't think he's got that discipline defensively, even in a double pivot. But the game needed a bit more running from that position that Kovacic had, and he offered that at the right time. I think he was the right substitute to bring on. But yeah, when it is looking forward to where do you play him, you're probably looking at a number 8, but then you've got a lot of good number 8s. Like you say, all he can do is take those chances when they come, and we've probably been a bit critical of him. And the goal against Watford was good, but he wasn't amazing in that game. And this is the first time I've really thought, you know what, he took his chance there, and maybe it took a few unsavoury chance and motivation from the Wolves fans to do that. But like you've just pointed out those fixtures there, he's got a chance over the next few weeks where there are games that are going to be sort of better for him to show what he can do. And if his role between now and the end of the season is to come on with 10, 15 minutes to go and just offer something else from midfield, then that could be a really useful position and person to have in the squad. You would probably say that position would be preferred to be taken by Phil Foden, but he was on the bench again. He comes on, does okay, swings in a good ball for Stones for the goal, but it feels like one step forward, one or two back for Foden at the moment. It just, something's not clicking. And when I was in the mix zone, he was the first to leave the dressing room and get on the bus good 10, 15 minutes before the rest of his teammates. And normally you wouldn't read anything into that, but it just probably was a day where he was just frustrated again not to be on the pitch. And like Nunes and like the others, there's fixtures where he can find his form, but yeah, it feels like something's not clicking and it's not yet got going from this season for after the heights of last season. Is that something that Foden should be worried about, or is it just rotation? And as Guardiola always says, I picked this team for this game.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, he can't be too happy with his start to the season. But at the same time, it's kind of not like the treble season when he couldn't get back in because the two players on the wings were playing outstandingly, or the players inside. You'd look at Gundu and Savinho, Doku against Wolves. Did any of them do enough to justify starting the next game? No. So Foden came on, played a nice ball for Haaland. Pep was very complimentary about his corner for the winning goal from Stones. So, perhaps that is enough to earn him a start against Sparta Prague, and you go from there. I think Foden would be more worried if he wasn't in form and everyone else was. But, I was just looking the other, where was it? So sort
I think
of Premier
it will help
League
his
goals.
case that go on.
Premier League goals for City this season. Haaland top with 10. Kovacic 3. Stones 2. Gvardiol 1. De Bruyne and Doku 1. Like, other than Haaland, no forward has more than one goal in the league. Like, that isn't really good enough for what City's forwards should be offering. And yeah, you can say, oh, Haaland's got loads. But like, if City's forwards want to be playing week in, week out, they need to be kind of delivering goals and assists. And you saw with Savinho and Doku yesterday, had so much of the ball. Doku especially just like properly wasteful with it. And if as long as you're doing that, then your place in the team isn't safe. So yeah, Foden hasn't had a good start, but he's not got very far. It's not like he's got loads to catch up when he does start games. But Pep puts the team on the opposition, but also how you are in training. So Foden's clearly not doing something right.
I think the wing dynamic is interesting at the moment. Like you say, Doku was a bit frustrating, and he kept trying to replicate his Fulham goal, which was only one game ago, but it feels like a lifetime because both of them found the sort of top corner of the stand, and Pep was furious at the second one. And next thing you know, Foden's on for him, and by the end of the game, he's thought, right, Foden and Doku and Savinho aren't working, so let's get Foden and Grealish on, and that was eventually got City back into the game and won it for them. But it's always exciting when you see Doku and Savinho on the team sheet. I'm not sure it's properly worked yet. Maybe against Chelsea, but then I think Savinho came off at half time, and that might have been there was just a bit of an unknown factor in it. It feels like it would be better and more balanced if it was unbalanced, if you get what I mean, where you maybe got Grealish a little bit like the treble season. You got Grealish creating an overload on one side, and then that gives Savinho or Doku the space on the other. But when you got both, the tactic is clearly to put cross after cross after cross in. I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's really working at the moment, and especially when you got these games where you got 11 players behind the ball, Doku and Savinho, you want running into space, not running into 3 players and passing it back. I know that's how Doku got his assist, but it felt like Guardiola wasn't happy with
wasn't
Doku.
much of an assist, was it? Wasn't like, wasn't a defense splitting ball. It was like, here, Josko, have the ball 25 yards out and smash it into the top corner. Yeah. It just wasn't, they didn't perform as they can. And yeah, Wolves made it really difficult for them. But like Savinho had a lot of joy early on by taking players on and sort of winning fouls off them. And then that kind of went away and he moved to the left in the second half and Doku to the right, and they kind of got less effective. Maybe because Wolves played 5 at the back, so they covered more of the space. I don't know, but it just, Grealish and Foden were more effective when they came on. And I think Doku and Savinho were kind of sensible signings to have in, in a league where there are more and more transitions in a match. Doku and Savinho make sense for City to kind of punish teams on the counter. But if Wolves are sitting back with 11 men, Grealish is probably your man to unpick those defenses and Foden as well. So, I mean, it's easy to say after the event, like, oh, he should have picked these 2 players rather than these 2. And they won because they brought Grealish and Foden on. So, it worked. But, yeah, it just felt a bit... yeah, Doku and Savinho just not at the best, and not alone at not being the best, because Gundogan is still, for a player who spent so much time sort of close to Haaland than anyone. There was no link up play between those 2. Like, they created nothing between them. Gundogan's still struggling to find his form back in the team. So it's not like, oh, the team was perfect apart from Savinho and Doku, but there were plenty of players in that team yesterday who should feel that they can offer more.
Yeah, I just think on the wings, it feels like it should work, but it's not at the moment. So I would not be surprised if Guardiola at some point returns to sort of what he knows, but every time you think, oh, Grealish has played well or Foden has, it feels like they're on the bench the next game. And I suppose if Doku's had such a good game against Fulham and then not a good one against Wolves, it underlines the fact that you're only one bad performance away from the bench again. And on the other hand of that that's good in terms of competition and rotation and keeping players completely motivated and sharp. We've spoken a little bit about... Go on.
Well, I don't want to downplay FPL, Fantasy Premier League, but kind of it has become more and more mainstream in football itself. And I think there was like, Phil Foden is obviously a very popular player in FPL because he gets a lot of goals and assists, certainly did last season. So there's kind of been a clamour building that, like, oh, it's time for Foden, it's time for Foden. So I think there was I think most of the surprise that Foden was on the bench at Wolves was kind of driven by that, because from a performance point of view, it was more surprising to see Grealish on the bench, because Grealish has been better this season. And Grealish probably did more against Wolves off the bench than Foden did. So, yeah, it's like you say, it is competition, but at some point, players who want to be players will start to feel like, I'm playing well, why shouldn't I be in that team instead of X or Y who isn't playing as well? So it'll be interesting to see the team for Wednesday.
Well, that's a good segue into that. The next fixtures are Sparta Prague at home, Southampton at home, Tottenham away in the Cup, Bournemouth away, Sporting away, Brighton away. Brighton away. That's a nice run of fixtures for any player to stake a claim, because then there's Tottenham at home, Feyenoord, Liverpool, a couple of more difficult games coming up. So it feels like that we will see rotation, but with a view to any player saying, go on, earn your spot for late November, December. This week is Sparta Prague at home, Southampton at home. You would expect 2 fairly comfortable wins. Who do you want to see in the Champions League against Sparta? given that's what we'll be focusing on because we'll probably be back before Southampton. But has anyone done enough to earn a place to drop out? Given it's a Champions League, you expect he would go as strong as possible?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's always that balance between sort of playing players who are in form versus playing players who aren't quite in form to give them a bit of to allow them the chance to play their way into form against, an opponent who isn't necessarily the toughest that City could be facing. So, it would be nice to give Savinho or Doku the chance to really kind of like, have their first moments of the season, as it would for Foden. You feel like Grealish is probably in the best form out of those. So does he deserve to play because he's in the best form? I don't know. And then, I think it would be nice to change up the midfield a bit. I think that's what I would like from the Sparta game. I think the midfield of Kovacic, Gundogan and Bernardo has struggled a bit in the last few weeks. And whether that is Nunes alongside Kovacic, whether that is Nunes instead of Gundogan or Foden in instead of Gundogan, I just feel like it would be nice to see a different approach in the middle, and see where City go from there.
It's a shame that De Bruyne and Walker are probably not going to be ready for that, because it feels like you could put De Bruyne in to give him some fitness back. Walker can go at right back for the same reasons, but also Lewis could maybe have another go in midfield. But there are sort of a couple of injuries at the wrong positions that are restricting what they can do. But no, I think I would agree. Maybe I think Gundogan just looks like he needs a bit of a rest, and it might be that they stick with that trio and maybe use players off the bench. Maybe it's a perfect game for Foden to play as number 10, or do you move Bernardo out wide and just refresh him a little bit? I think it will be interesting to see what they do, but I'm actually looking at Sparta Prague's results, and they've got a 3-0 win against Salzburg and a draw at Stuttgart, so they're not going to be pushovers. They've got a couple of good results already and a level on points with City, so I should probably take back the easy win comment that I said before, but City will be looking at 3 points in all of the home games that are remaining now, and they passed the most difficult one and into the Juventus is the one in December that's probably the more difficult one, but these two coming up, which is Sparta and Feyenoord, and even Lisbon away, are the ones where they can really push up that league, and I think Guardiola will prioritise that, and then maybe use his substitutes later on, or the Southampton game to bring back other players, or do the rotation. In terms of a prediction, I'm going to downgrade my what I was going to say 4-0. I'm going to say 2-0 after seeing Sparta's previous results. What can I get from you?
I'll go for 3-1. The lack of clean sheets to continue.
Oh, of course, I forgot that they will concede first, and
should be a strong City win, you would think.
Yeah, I think that will be the order, and that unbeaten run, that record unbeaten run, to continue. We'll be back later in the week after the Champions League. Look ahead to Southampton and see if any of those injured players are back, who has played their way into form, and if anyone has played their way out of form ahead of that game against one of the relegation favourites in Southampton. Thanks for joining us. Leave us a comment, a like, a subscribe as ever, and we'll be back later in the week.